Thank you for calling, Mr. Newland. I know the red telephone will be a nice birthday present for your daughter.
I'm sure it will. Thank you, Miss Blake.
You're welcome. Goodbye. Up you go, Mr. Newland. Hope you enjoy being number 5 for the day. Well, sure, these are records. Customers' records. But to me, they're, I don't know, something more. They've got to be. These are the people I have to live with and understand 5 days a week. They're pretty important to me, too. A lot of people in here. A lot of good days. Bad ones. A lot of fun. Happy experiences. Plenty of rough ones. And a lot of learning. Golly, you people, all of you, Mrs. Periwinkle, and Mr. Newland, Mr. Bronson, and Mrs. Merrill. How can I ever forget Mrs. Merrill, or any of you? Because of you and my supervisor, Marge, I'm really able to help and serve the people I talk to every day. But it wasn't once you all seemed so hard to talk to.
Just one telephone, dear. One's enough.
My apartment's too small.
Just put it in the center of the house. We'll get to it.
5 telephones in one house? Ridiculous, I tell you, ridiculous.
Well, an awful lot of my contacts seemed difficult. They scared me when I first started on the desk. These were the people in my city who needed my help, the telephone knowledge I'd been given. And I guess I didn't quite understand how to get to them. Although I was eager and anxious, I liked to talk to them. Liked my job, too. But, as I said before, learning from people and my supervisor, I found a way to help customers know about, use, and enjoy our telephone service. It's called 4 Steps to Sales. 1, fact-finding. 2, making the recommendation. 3, answering objections when they come up. 4, closing the sale, asking the customer to use our service. And up here on top, that's what we call the platform of sales. For me, this is an outline, a simple, organized plan. The only way I know to guide myself. To get the facts necessary to make a logical recommendation, so I can suggest to a customer quickly what telephone service he needs. Tell him what he needs and why. Answering any questions he might have about the recommendation I made. And closing, asking the customer to accept and use the service recommended. Well, these 4 steps have worked wonders for me and for the customer. It's a way to match the customer with the proper telephone service. And if you follow the 4 steps, it can lead to some pretty exciting contacts. This first step, getting the facts. Well, we get certain facts to handle any contact. But the things we have to know in order to give our customers the best, most complete telephone service are the number of rooms, the number of floors, and who uses the service. From what we find out, we have to decide what telephone service people really need. Terrific challenge, finding things out about people, especially when you can't see them. Pretty satisfying. Fun, too, if it comes out right. But if it doesn't, well, on this first step, getting the facts, that's where Mrs. Periwinkle came in. She was one of the first contacts I ever had.
Hello, this is Mrs. Roberta Periwinkle. We're moving into a new house next month.
I'll be glad to help you, Mrs. Periwinkle. May I have your telephone number, please?
Main 4, 1984.
May I have your new address, please?
2645 Woodbridge Road.
Is it a bigger house, Mrs. Periwinkle?
Yes.
Thank you. If you'll wait just a moment, I'll get your card out of the file so I'll be able to help you better. Just one telephone. Moving to a bigger house. Good chance to ask about additional sets. Maybe color, too. Here we are, Mrs. Periwinkle.
Yes?
Since you're moving to a bigger house, would you consider having some additional telephones?
No. One's enough.
Oh. Well, now, we can have a man out to your new address on the 17th. Will you be home at that time? I felt, well, unsatisfied. You know how you feel when a contact doesn't go right? She needed more than one telephone. Well, I believe everybody with more than one room to live in needs additional telephones. Yet I couldn't find out how many rooms her new house had. Couldn't even find out the number of people who were going to use the service. I had no more facts than when I began the contact. I wondered if maybe the kinds of questions I'd asked, how I asked them, if maybe that wasn't the key to getting facts. Well, I was determined to try, and I didn't have long to wait when I got another call.
My name is Newland, George Newland.
How can I help you, Mr. Newland?
I want to get a telephone.
Have you ever applied for a telephone before, sir?
Sure, have one. 2, in fact. Been a customer of yours for over 20 years. But not in this city, in Hawkinsville.
I see. I suppose your company is transferring you here?
That's right. I'm to be division sales manager.
That's wonderful, Mr. Newland. Could you tell me the name of your company, please, for our records?
Simons and Company.
Uh-huh. What will your new address be?
298 Ivy Road.
That's a lovely neighborhood. Now, how many rooms will your new house have?
Look, I didn't call to give you a short history of my life.
You know where the house is.
Now, all I want to find out is how long it'll take to get a couple of phones put in.
Golly, Mr. Newland, we want to give you the best possible telephone service we can. That's why it's important for us to know certain facts. If we know the number of rooms, then we can help you choose the best placement of telephones. If we know how many people there are in your family, well, we can suggest service that's the most comfortable and convenient.
Well, all right, that seems fair enough. What do you want to know?
Something about your new home, Mr. Newland. How many rooms has it?
7. 4 bedrooms. Got 3 kids to put in them.
Do they all use the telephone?
Well, not the 2 boys so much, but my daughter. Seems like she never stops using it.
Well, once I really made it clear that I was interested in helping. He told me about his wife, teenage daughter, 2 younger sons. And that house with all those rooms, 2 floors and a basement. A terrific opportunity. I was so excited I could hardly wait to start recommending telephones. And that's when I found out about step number 2, making the recommendation. Yep, I jumped right into step 2 with both my heads. Oh, my goodness, Mr. Newland. With your family and that house, you need an individual line and many more than 2 telephones.
I do?
Oh, yes. Of course, the one in the master bedroom's fine.
Good.
Let's see. Cost for one telephone will be $6.20 a month plus tax and $4.50 for installation. How's that sound?
Okay.
Then you need an additional telephone for the kitchen. Don't you think so?
Well, I never thought of that.
Only cost another $1.25. And one for the basement. That's $1.25 more.
No, I don't think so.
Well, what do you think about an additional telephone for the living room, sir? Maybe in color. We have some lovely colors, and they're only $10 more apiece.
I never considered one there.
Well, I'm sure you'll consider having another telephone in your daughter's room, won't you, Mr. Newland? In color?
No. Sounds like we'd be tangled up in telephones. I feel we should just have what we've always had, a telephone in the hall and one in the master bedroom. Worked before, stick to what we're used to.
I remember. I finished with Mr. Newland and tumbled right off my happy pink cloud. I was quietly consoling myself for losing Mr. Newland when Marge, my supervisor, came by and asked me if anything was wrong. I told Marge about Mr. Newland, how I went through step number 1, got my facts, the kind of questions I'd asked, the information he volunteered. But when I started on step number 2, recommendations, well, I guess I just don't know how to make recommendations.
No. I think the number of telephones you wanted to recommend was right. It's just... Will you read the ads in the papers, Jennifer?
Sure, especially the Sunday ones.
Well, ever notice how nowadays they advertise in kind of units? I mean, you don't just see a refrigerator or a stove, but the whole kitchen. Everything fitted in place. And cars, they don't just sell the body, but heaters, radio, everything.
Come to think of it, you hardly ever see a skirt or dress by itself anymore, but with all the accessories that really make it pay off.
The complete picture.
Golly, I recommended additional telephones room by room. No wonder Mr. Newland felt like he was all tangled up in telephones. You know, I'll bet he would have accepted the recommendation if I'd done it as a whole instead of piece by piece. And I know just what I'd recommend for him. Let's see. Bedrooms, living room, kitchen, dining room, basement. Well, of course, an individual like. Then first, Mr. Newland, I'd put a telephone in the kitchen. It's really convenient. One here for comfort, here for convenience. This one and this one for privacy. There. That's complete telephone service for your home, Mr. Newland. Really terrific.
No. 5 telephones in one house? Whoever heard of that?
Would really be wonderful service, Mr. Newland. It fits perfectly.
Not for me, it doesn't. The front hall's centrally located. My daughter's got enough energy to walk to the phone. Costs too much.
Guess you need more than just recommending complete service.
You need reasons. Reasons that mean something to the customer.
Oh?
Well, when you get the facts, you've got to interpret them in terms of what you know, or what your training's taught you about our equipment. The things you know about how you and your family live, how your friends live. You take the facts, what you know about people, you come up with reasons.
Gee, like with 3 children, Mrs. Newland must spend an awful lot of time in the kitchen. And a teenage daughter would just love a telephone of her own.
We can also make other assumptions, like, well, a 5-room apartment has 2 bedrooms usually. So does a 5-room house.
Yes, I knew the Newlands' new house had 2 floors and a basement. And, well, I feel that people need at least 1 telephone on each floor.
Feel the same way myself. But even more important, today people need telephones in each of the 3 major areas of their home. Living, working, sleeping. People don't usually recognize this. And Jennifer, we're failing them if we don't recommend them. Now, take your Mr. Newland, for instance. You forgot to tell him why. And when we make one all-inclusive recommendation, well, the recommendations have got to always include the reason for placing the telephone in each of the locations we suggest.
You mean more than saying privacy or convenience?
It's got to be a personal reason, based on a specific need. We're selling the value of the telephone, not the equipment.
Golly. You know, I should have said, Mr. Newland, the service I'd like to recommend for your new home includes an individual line, so that the service is always available whenever you need it. A telephone in the kitchen, which is pretty important to Mrs. Newland because she spends a lot of time there, cooking for her big family. You need a telephone in the basement because of the long stairs to climb, up and down when your wife's doing the laundry. You'll want a telephone in the living room, Mr. Newland, because I'm sure a family like yours spends a lot of time in the living room. And if you don't feel like getting up to answer the telephone, you don't have to. A telephone in the master bedroom, of course, Mr. Newland, to handle all the night calls. And service for your home wouldn't be complete, sir, without a color telephone and a listing for your daughter. It's important for a teenage person to have a sense of independence a telephone will give her. There you are, Mr. Newland. Don't you agree this plan fits your home and the needs of your family?
Fine. But all those phones, what'll it cost?
What about rates?
What about them? They scare you? Think they're too high?
Oh, golly, no. Not for the service and all the equipment people get.
But a lot of people think telephone service, good service, is much more expensive than it really is. So why not use the low cost as an advantage? Meet people head on if we feel people really want to know it. Let's give, well, only the monthly rate in a lump sum as part of the recommendation. Tell him before he asks how much he gets for so little.
Sure, like in a grocery store. All this telephone service, Mr. Newland, is only $11.20 a month plus tax. And golly, we can give him the connection charge after he accepts the service.
Yes. This way you can answer a possible question, even anticipate and avoid a possible objection.
That's right. First, we get our facts with clear, pointed questions that lead to full answers. Then we evaluate them based on our training and knowledge. And second, we make our recommendations with reasons.
Of course, we hope to make our recommendations in such a way that the customer accepts our complete recommended service. And the best way to find out is to end the recommendation with a question, the way you did, to see if the customer agrees and is ready to buy without further discussion.
That doesn't happen very often with my customers.
I don't think any of us can do this all the time.
Or even half the time.
Which brings us to step number 3, answering objections. You know, I like to think objections are always new facts, new questions, and all we're doing is answering them. Well, you see, first crack, we may not hit on the reasons for buying which appeal to our particular customer. Maybe we didn't interpret the facts correctly. Maybe we didn't have enough facts.
Oh, well, I don't know. I really think one telephone's enough.
With this kind of objection, you might want to do a little more fact-finding. Find out how she uses the service. Perhaps where she intends to put that one telephone, so that you can point up the advantages of having other locations.
Oh, I see.
Come on, try it with me.
Okay. Where do you plan to put your one telephone, Mrs. Periwinkle?
We want it in the front hall by the bedroom.
Golly, I had a feeling you used the kitchen an awful lot.
Oh, yes, I do. Cook and bake.
Well, don't you think you might find it a little inconvenient having to leave what you're doing in the kitchen? You know, it's a strange thing, Mrs. Periwinkle, but we human beings have a peculiar habit of never being where the telephone is.
That's pretty good, Jennifer.
I remember that from Family Affair, about people's habits. Guess I could have gone on to really convince Mrs. Periwinkle about the kitchen or any other location where she needed a telephone.
Too expensive, I tell you. Too darn expensive.
What about this one?
Well, he obviously doesn't know how little an additional telephone costs. Or maybe he doesn't appreciate. Or maybe you haven't really convinced him or told him the value of the service. So you have to answer this objection by re-emphasizing the advantages in relation to the cost. And remember, each of your answers should close with a good question to get the customer's agreement.
Oh, I think I begin to see. As for cost, Mr. Newland, the additional telephones will cost only a few cents more per day than the basic service. You have to pay for a main line, sir, and the main line is the biggest part of the cost. But it's the additional telephones that really make your service convenient and complete. Would I like a second chance with Mr. Newland, now that I know a little bit more? Well, no use dreaming. I guess steps 3 and 4 kind of overlap. As a matter of fact, all 4 steps sometimes overlap. Get the right facts. Make recommendations with good, solid reasons. You can avoid objections and get right into step 4, closing the sale. Well, I ran downhill at first with step number 4. Mr. Bronson added the final page in my customer history on closing the sale. The fax told me he was a bachelor, just out of the service, setting up his first apartment. 1 bedroom, living room, kitchen. We can give you wonderful telephone service, Mr. Bronson, tailored just to your needs.
Great.
I'd recommend a private line for your unlimited calling, a color telephone in the living room and one in the bedroom, so whatever you're doing, you won't have to dash out to answer it. Total monthly charge for all this telephone service is only $7.45 plus tax.
Sounds pretty good.
Oh, it is, Mr. Bronson. You need a telephone in the living room, but an additional telephone in the bedroom is a nice, secure thing to have around.
Sounds like a good deal.
Oh, it is, Mr. Bronson. It's the most complete service I'd recommend for you.
Well, yeah. Yeah.
Well, I think it'd work out fine.
Well, Oh, maybe just one phone. In the bedroom. I'll think about another one later.
I anticipated all the objections, and it fizzled out in a bunch of silence.
Oh, believe me, Jennifer, getting people to accept our recommendations, to say yes, doesn't need to be tough. It can be an easy thing. The secret is asking questions and then recognizing when the customer agrees with your recommendation.
I guess I talked too much. The first time Mr. Bronson said my recommendation sounded pretty good, I should have said, "Fine, Mr. Bronson, we can have a man out there on Tuesday." Should have wrapped it up.
Sure. Some people don't like to make decisions, to give an outright yes. Mr. Bronson was really pretty helpful. The important thing in closing a sale is to find out whether and when the customer agrees with you. And the best way to find out is to ask a question.
Like, "Don't you agree this is the best arrangement for you?" Or, "Shall we have this installed on Thursday?"
Good. The point is, Jennifer, always try to close at the end of your recommendation. If the customer objects, then the next time to try to close is at the end of your answer to the objection. And you try to close at the end of everything you say from then on, with a question.
What about the times you run up against solid rock?
Oh, well, sometimes you can do everything beautifully. Have your whole approach really organized, go right up the 4 steps and still get a turn down. But you can't win with everybody. It's humanly impossible.
How true.
But at least you've told them we want to give the best possible service. Maybe you've planted the seed for future contacts, who knows? Turndowns are a normal part of the business.
I guess so.
If you believe in importance of additional phones, in complete service, it'll get through, Jennifer. And you'll be able to close more satisfactorily with more and more people.
If I follow the 4 steps.
If you do, then you won't go wrong. But remember, you've got to wrap the human element around the 4 steps.
I was wondering what Marge meant by that when Mrs. Merrill called.
Hello? This is Mrs. Alfred Merrill.
At 627 West Barnes Road.
Be glad to help you, Mrs. Merrill.
You see, dear, my husband retired 5 years ago, and we finally decided to give up our big house
And move into an apartment. It's really the darlingest place
Mrs.
I've ever...
Merrill sounded happy as a kitten talking about her new apartment. And, well, that was the missing link. That's when it happened to me for the first time. Suddenly, I got caught up in her enthusiasm. And, well, in my mind, I became Mrs. Merrill. I could see myself living in, using the apartment the way I felt Mr. and Mrs. Merrill would. From what she told me, I quickly made a sort of mental sketch of the apartment layout. The living room. Small dining area. Kitchen. Now everything was alive for me. I had more than just words. I had pictures. Word pictures of telephone service that I could paint for people to live in. I even imagine what Mr. Merrill looked like. I told Mrs. Merrill her complete telephone service included a color set in the bedroom. Because with their new tempo of life, they'd have more leisure. They'd probably want to nap in the afternoons or sleep late in the mornings. Mrs. Merrill told me she liked to bake and cook a lot for her children, her grandchildren. Well, I said it isn't any fun to keep running back and forth all day into another room to answer the telephone. So? Mrs. Merrill told me that in order to keep active during retirement, Mr. Merrill did some part-time bookkeeping at home. This is practical, I said, and necessary for Mr. Merrill's enjoyment of his work and the new, more relaxed pace he should be living. Yes, wrap the human element around the 4 steps, and you can really make people see and understand from word pictures the complete service you recommend. Yes, the 4 steps to sales. Works terrifically for me if I don't skip any of the steps. And believe me, I don't. I put this together with this, the people, and wow. Excuse me. Miss Blake speaking.
My name is Newland. George Newland.
Mr. Newland? Yes, sir.
I want to talk to you about having my phone moved to another room.
We can certainly take care of you, Mr. Newland.
I won't be a second. I know just where your card is.
Golly. That's the great thing about this job, isn't it? You never know from one contact to the next.